Welcome to another Glastonbury Gabriel video. Today something a little bit different. We're lucky we have another video from Jeff over in America. Today's film is interesting. He looks at derelict buildings he drives past on his job as a truck driver and ponders how some of these buildings became empty. So let's go across and have a look at what he's done.
Hello everyone, this is Jeff. I'm trying to wrap my head around all of the stuff that you pass as you travel that is abandoned and is unused. So much of the time you don't even know what this stuff is. Like abandoned houses. How on earth does a house become abandoned? As many of you probably know, I nearly died last December. Had I have died, I really don't think anybody would have stepped forward and said, well, we can't use that building anymore because Jeff died. Even buildings in my life that I had a deep connection with, like this building. I actually built this house. Every stick, every timber, every window, every door was hung by me. I would get paid on Friday and I built this house. Had I have died last December, I really don't think these people would have said, well, we have to abandon this house. Even though I have an intimate connection with this building that no one else on the planet could ever have. Sometimes we do know a little bit of the history of these buildings, even though they're now abandoned, like this building. This building is in Montesano, Washington, where I live, and it is the building where you could bring the bark from chittum trees and sell, and they would boil the bark and make Exlax out of it. Now, the active ingredient in Exlax is synthetically made, so they don't peel trees anymore. So it's easy to understand how this building could fall out of service. But changing technologies doesn't mean that a building has to be abandoned. Look at this building. This was the phone exchange in Montesano at the turn of the century. The girls worked downstairs at the switchboards and they actually lived upstairs, but the building wasn't abandoned and it's actually another business. So what is it about a building that makes it become derelict and go unused until it falls down? It's something that I just don't understand and I wrestle with a lot. This building's original use came to a crashing end, and yet it is still used as a church. It was, in the 20s, a very ornate, neon-covered theater, and the owner of which had a wife and a little family, and he wanted to be the first theater in Washington State to have a talking movie. So he arranged for the movie The Jazz Singer to be sent to his movie theater. And when he heard that the train was carrying the film was stopped in Centralia, Washington, he told his wife, I'm going to jump in the car and I'm going to meet the train down there and I'm going to grab the movie and I'll have it back here before tonight's showing, and we can be the first movie theater in Washington to have this talking film shown. And on the way there to pick it up, it started to snow and he had a car accident and died, and his wife was unable to continue running a movie theater. So it was sold and it became a church, which it has been a church now for almost 100 years. This is a building that I pass all the time in St. Joseph, Missouri. It was actually the cattle exchange building, kind of a stock market for cows. They work on it for a while and then they stop, and then they work on it for a while. They need to just give up and let this poor building die with what dignity it has left, because these pictures do not do it justice. It is a mess. But Omaha, a few years ago, overhauled its cattle exchange into $1 million condominiums. So now everyone is trying to do it. And if they can succeed, no one would be happier than me to see an old building repurposed. But this building is a mess. It is, in my opinion, beyond hope. And I think they should just bulldoze it. This is actually a nuclear plant that's right outside of Montesano. My father actually worked here back in the early 70s when they were building it. It was never completed. They abandoned it. It's a call center now for Overstock.com, and it is a place where they have filmed movies. Part of The Abyss was filmed here. This is what billions and billions and billions of wasted dollars looks like. This is a little roadside diner near the nuclear power plant that is abandoned. It also is abandoned. I have an older sister who was much closer to my father than I was, and every time we drive by this diner, she always says something like, "I can picture our father having lunch there," or "I can picture our father having dinner there on a Friday evening after working all week." My father had a motorhome caravan, and he worked in construction, and oftentimes he would go for a year or more at a time and work the construction jobs and then come home. And now, all of these years later, we live about 5 miles away from the nuclear plant that he worked at, and she reminisces about this place every time we pass. In my travels, I pass an awful lot of abandoned and unused buildings, and I just can't wrap my head around it no matter how hard I try. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Sometimes we get an insight to the history of a building that explains why its life ended. This is the Mathis Hotel in Reno. I go to Reno a lot hauling Sherwin-Williams paint and paintbrushes, and this was a large casino hotel in Reno called the Mathis. It was the starting point for a lot of famous people's career, like Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis and Frank Sinatra. This building couldn't be saved because it was built right at the end of World War II, and because there was shortages of everything, they scrimped on everything. It had very little rebar in the concrete. It had very little of everything. They tried to make do with whatever they had, and when the engineers looked at the building to restore it, they just shook their heads and said, "No, it needs to be blown up and we need to build a new building," which is amazingly sad, but in this case, understandable. This is a gas station in Shamrock, Texas that I pass all of the time, and it always makes me very happy because someone lovingly restored it, and it kind of restores your faith in mankind that someone took the time and the trouble to restore this old building and to keep it serviceable. And on this note, I will leave you. Stay well, everybody, and I will see everybody later. Bye.